الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So, we started looking at most of the first chapter of the text last week. For those who are just joining in, we're looking at the Book of Assistance by Imam Haddad, rahimahullah. It's a very concise set of chapters that provides a framework, roadmap to increase spirituality and spiritual development. And so this first chapter that we've been looking at is on what's called yaqeen. Does anybody remember what yaqeen means, or kind of a baseline definition from what we've discussed in the last couple of sessions? Certainty, yeah. And if we were to flesh that out, how would that kind of be something we relate to? Like if you were to define certainty, what does that mean in terms of like spirituality, religion, some of what we've been discussing?
Conviction in your faith.
Conviction in your faith, yeah. It's something concrete, right? And so what Imam al-Haddad does is that he sets yaqeen as a destination point. So it's literally, the text is going to be a roadmap. And what we want to be able to do is engage it, read it, and then understand how the sequential chapters all relate to each other. There's a connection across topics. So if people want to pull up the book, you could just do a Google search for the Book of Assistance, PDF. We've been reading through it. We want to continue to do that. And just jump right into it. Maghrib is going to be coming in a little earlier each week that we go through this. So we want to just maximize on time. And so where we were was essentially on page 8, which is the second page of the first chapter. And we were at the second bullet point, right? So the first bullet point talked about kind of a mode or method through which one can now start to increase in yaqeen. And it spoke about the importance of reflecting on Allah through the Quran, through the Sunnah. We talked about kind of the need to unlearn some things that subconsciously we might not even be aware that we've learned, right? Likely many of us have not necessarily sat down in a structured format to be able to think out, well, who is God to me at the end of the day? And so point number 1, to recap, Imam al-Haddad is saying that you got to learn about who God is through what God has said he is. And not necessarily just take it indirectly, subconsciously, but engage the Quran, engage the hadith, use it as a means, as a mechanism, right? There's a hadith Qudsi that says, Ana inda dhanni abdi bi, that I am as my servant thinks I am. So the God that you believe God to be is the God that you will be in worship of. And that's not just an abstract text now, right? You can't say, because this book says this, then that's what I believe, but belief is within you. And it's not just regurgitating or parroting somebody else's comments, but understanding again, what does this mean to me? And you want to get to a place where, as a reflection question, you can literally write at the top of a notebook, who is Allah to me? And then you can answer that within yourself. Not somebody else's answer, not the answer that you feel like you're supposed to give, but an answer that allows for you to then feel and recognize, who is this entity that I'm actually in worship of? And it'll then help to create a recognition of an approach to religion, ritual, practice at the end of the day. As to where there is an opportunity through certitude to deepen in that relationship. So why don't we start reading from point number 2, where he says the second is, we want to get through this chapter and get into chapter number 2 on intention and just start building into that a little bit. Can somebody read from where it says the second is to learn from looking at the kingdom of the heavens and the earth? Anybody can start. Go for it.
The second is to learn from looking at the kingdom of the heavens and the earth and the wondrous and astounding creatures that God made them teem with. That this brings about certainty is indicated by his saying, we shall show them our signs on the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth.
So, point number 2, what is it saying? So let's take a quick minute as people are trickling in. If you can turn to the person next to you, what is Imam al-Haddad saying is point number 2? If we were to pull a practical step out of it, just for 2 minutes, in pairs, so 2 people. So everybody gets to talk and it goes quick. What is he saying in this paragraph? What are you pulling from it? And then we'll come back and discuss. If you don't know the person sitting next to you, just introduce yourself. If there's somebody sitting by themselves, just pull them into your pair. Okay, so what are some of the things we're pulling from this as a point now? He's going into point number 2 as a way to develop this thing that's called yaqeen. What is he saying here? What do you take from what he's saying? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
He's saying witness everything around you and then also witness the creation of life around you and use that to tie you to the ayah at the end of the paragraph.
But what does it mean? Like, what are you taking from it if you extrapolate from it? Yeah.
By observing the world around us and all of the signs that Allah has put in front of us of his creation, it increases us in our certainty, in our yaqeen.
So how would you do this? Yeah.
Part of me feels like a way of doing that is like simply just communicating with people, like asking questions to find out like what kind of knowledge they have in order to like condense your version of what your truth is in accordance with Allah, I guess.
You were going to say something? Did you have your hand raised? Would you like to say something?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we were just talking about like when you observe all the beauty around you and the intentionality of like how everything is created, and also just your ability to appreciate it. Like God didn't need to make everything so beautiful. Like for example, the sunset. I think Chef asked you that example a while ago, but he did, and we get to observe that and appreciate it, and that just is evidence of his existence.
Yeah. So a key word in this is not wonder and creation, but the role that you and I play in being able to yield is the aspect that is observation. You want to be able to distill what this is as an actual practice. Because right now, all of us are seeing something. Correct? Like you are mostly looking at me. I'm sorry about that. But fundamentally, you're in a place where you can literally be seeing something, but it doesn't mean that it's actually doing anything for you. And the opportunity to gain in this kind of gaze, this kind of observation, necessitates understanding what has to happen in a matter of practice in order for one to get to this place, right? We sat down at the beginning of the halaqah, people are coming in. Aya showed us a beautiful picture of her nephew, Muhammad, right? May Allah preserve him. All day you walk past babies. You could sit on an airplane and a baby is crying. You could be in a place where you're at a restaurant and a baby just went to the bathroom or the diaper is being changed next to you. You could walk down the street and there's somebody nursing their child. The challenge there is one of kind of the presentation of it as such, but also the mode that you're in to be able to really take from the beauty of that child, right? Nobody is going to be in a place where they say, man, that baby screaming on that plane is so ugly. Unless you're a horrible person and you find children to be ugly. And even if you find adults to be ugly, then there's something your heart is telling you about yourself. Because everyone has beauty in them. But the opportunity to now be in a place where we are seated, it's not that the rest of my sensory perception is challenged. I'm half asleep on a flight after Fajr. I've heard my own children cry. I'm not trying to hear somebody else's kid cry. I haven't eaten anything on this plane. For some reason, they thought that people wouldn't bring suitcases on the plane, and we're bringing them, and they're telling us there's no room for everything is causing irritation. That's not observation. You see the child, but you're not seeing it for what it is. You're seeing it through everything else that's agitating you inwardly. Versus I'm sitting now in a place, there's stillness, the image is presented to me, all I'm doing is focusing on the child. And I can see his beauty in its entirety. Do you get what I'm saying? How do you create for yourself a mode of observation in that way? And I want you to think about this, and I'm going to give you some insight to add to what it is, because it's not about being away from the world or away from reality, right? So Habe and I and two other guys yesterday went to visit one of our students at NYU, whose name is Shahir. Make dua for him. He was in a really bad accident last week. It left him with some burns, but there was also some challenges that he explained to us, but very much so obvious that you go through an accident like that is traumatic. His car started to smoke and then flames came from the back of the car as he's driving. He lost control of it. And as he's going through this, the lack of control had him go down a little cliff that he was driving on. The car turned over multiple times. And then somehow, subhanAllah, landed still on its wheels. And as he got out of it, he saw that the fire was spreading. He tried to put it out with water. It didn't work. And then the whole thing went up in flames. That's not an easy thing to go through, right? And you correct me if I'm wrong, when we sat with him, he brought us water. He spoke to us as if he was in a place where it was we who should be thanked for coming to visit him. Rather, our prophetic guidance from our teacher, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that we have a responsibility to be able to go visit those who are in these states. How does he go through that and he's still able to be in a place where there's a sense of centeredness? Do you get what I mean? Or I'm looking at this picture, right? And I drove these guys. We took him out for dinner so that he could kind of get a little bit of a breather, dropped them home, took the car I bought for my brother-in-law, got back to my house at 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't sleep so much, got my kids ready for school, prayed Fajr, everything. It's a normal routine. I want to still be able to sit here and find beauty in this picture, or beauty in the fact that somebody that I care about, through my extension of care for Aya, I care for the one that she cares for. Do you understand? It doesn't mean that the world has to be perfect. The idea is to take this as for what spiritual exercise is meant to yield, the ability to still have contentment and balance in the midst of other things that we experience: exhaustion, tiredness, grief, sadness, depression, anxiety, whatever it is. You can have both of them exist simultaneously. What's keeping us from observing in that way? You can't do it if the world is chaotic outside and you've given abode to chaos inwardly. The same way I asked you last week that your ability to know who God is to you necessitates formulating subjective perspective. And that a paradox of decision making is that when you don't make a choice, you have chosen. So if unconsciously you have now created for yourself a conceptualization of a God that is an angry old man in the sky looking for a reason to punish you, that's the God you're still going to worship at the end of the day. It can be really easy to leave behind ritual when it comes to being a means to connect to that God. But when you can understand a God that is watching over you as opposed to just watching you, a God that loves you more than a mother loves its child, a God that wants to look for reason to accept from you rather than push you away, but it's an individual conviction. The same way you have to determine for yourself who fundamentally is the God that I believe God to be. And Imam al-Haddad says, we'll start by looking at what Allah tells you about himself. And right from the onset, he tells you that he is Ar-Rahman, he is Ar-Rahim. These are not meant to be cliche statements, they're realities. That's what he's telling you he is in that initial introduction. So here too, you subjectively, it's not meant to be a lonely experience, but with people around you still, you be comfortable in knowing yourself, and you ask yourself, how do I find stillness in my routine? How do I allow for myself to have moments where I can actually enjoy some of the things that exist around me? And if you were truly to just look at the magnificence of the most minute of creation, as well as the most vast parts of creation, your routine as a Muslim is built around elemental relationships. Your prayer is attached to a cyclical pattern of the sun. You literally are told to look at the sun, look at the sky for the most fundamental aspect of your worship, which is your salah. And may Allah make us those who are committed and steadfast to our prayers, and those who taste the sweetness that only salah can bring into our lives. When you make wudu, you're making wudu again through this elemental relationship. It's with water. And if you don't have water, it's not possible. There's circumstances, then you're making it with the earth, the dirt, through tayammum. But do you get what I'm saying? The challenge comes not in being able to see. If you are visually impaired, that's different, right? My eyes, I have a negative 10.5 prescription. And so by legal standards, I'm actually categorically impaired in that sense. My eye doctor told me the last few years my vision's getting better. And I thought I was like a superhuman. I was like, yeah, my eyes are getting good. And he's like, no, it means you're getting older and your muscles aren't working well and they don't strain themselves so much because they're weak. I was like, great. Thanks for making me feel like garbage, doctor. I appreciate it. It's not that kind of vision. You can see something. I want to see it differently. And the mode that the text is giving to you is not just an outcome that's devoid of the step to get there. But if you cannot create stillness, to reflect, to observe, doesn't mean that you just take a glance. But the same way you're all seated right now, some of you have been seated since 6 o'clock, some of you for the last 2 minutes. If you can sit still and pay attention to somebody wretched like me, you can sit still for a few minutes and watch the sunrise. Because nobody's debating its beauty. What we have to figure out is, why are you not looking at it? The birds don't know how beautiful their song is. The sun is not able to conceptualize its own beauty. The way that you can gaze at the stars in the sky, they don't know how luminous they are. You are the only creature in creation that has the capacity to not just observe, but appreciate that beauty. What's keeping you from being able to engage in that? Do you understand? Turn to the person next to you and answer that question. What's keeping me from looking at the sun when it rises? What's keeping me from actually sitting and gazing at the beauty of whatever it is that surrounds me elementally in this world? What's getting in the way that's making it hard for me to be active, deliberate in my observation? Does the question make sense? So let's turn to the person next to you. If you don't know them, share your name. Can we just move up and move in a bit so we're not clogging the doorway and giving people room to pray? And then we'll come back and discuss. Is this easier than I'm sitting here? Yeah? Do you think people are getting the same experience? That I'm not writing stuff down? No, but do you think it's still going fine without writing things down? Yeah? Okay. I feel like sometimes I speak very abstractly, and I don't know if it's hard to follow, but let's see how it goes, and then yeah, we'll see. I'm going to stand for a second. My feet are asleep. Hey, can a couple of you guys go down to get the food? Yeah? If you go, the carts are right there, and she's typically on Thompson Street, like in front of one of the fire hydrants. Yeah? No. My foot's just asleep. I'm going to sit down, okay? Okay. Shh. So, what gets in the way? What's keeping me from looking at the sun? Yeah.
So, two things. One could be you take it for granted, and another would be just like a natural tendency. I think a lot of people might have it where you look at you notice bad things more than good things, and that leads you to taking good things for granted.
Yeah, we all have a negative cognitive bias. That's just how it is, right? You feel more the impact of losing money than you do at making money. It hits you harder. A compliment doesn't impact you as much as a criticism does. It's the way your brains are wired, right? When we talk about intention, we're going to talk about it through a prism of consciousness, right? This is what it's rooted in. But these are a couple of things that get in the way. What else? What else gets in the way?
Being super anxious all the time. Like, we were talking about how the way that society's built has made us need to be stimulated all the time unless you are super active about trying to get away from all the noise. I think we're letting the noise take over or at least I am letting the noise take over because it's difficult to let yourself just think, because then you're thinking about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and there's the pressure to actually do the things wrong right.
Yeah, it's not easy. And we're not identifying obstacles to be able to then be self-deprecating, right? This is a tool of shaitan. Don't give him victory over you. You are all good people. And the notion is that good people can be better. The default doesn't have to be that I'm terrible at life. When you have a divine command of lowering your gaze, and I talked about this with some of our student leaders yesterday, it gets overtly simplified in terms of a very surface level understanding of gender interactions, right? But fundamentally, what is rooted in this is an idea that consumption is not just merely food that we eat, water that we drink, but consumption is through all of our organs of sensory perception. What you're hearing, what you're seeing. And the sheer abundance of stimulation that you have, rooted not just in, I am observing and taking in so much consciously or unconsciously, but the particularity that you live in a consumer-driven society that is bombarding you with ads from the minute you wake up till the minute you go to bed, telling you your happiness is rooted on the acquisition of what they sell to you, and creates now formulaic processes of success that say that you don't have time to sit still for 5 minutes. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that there's 2 blessings that people are going to get deprived of. That you have health and free time. You're not going to use it. Why we encourage you to fast outside of Ramadan is that the act in and of itself, if you're physically capable of it, creates an opportunity to have mindfulness about what you're consuming in every which way possible. And so the lower your gaze part isn't just hey, have this weird understanding of what it means to interact across genders, but understand that what you look at impacts your heart. How you look at it impacts your heart. What you're consuming. If I literally just poured food into your mouth constantly, what would it do to you? And you can say, well, it's not possible. But you think about it, that at every given moment, you just ate and ate and ate, or you just drank and drank and drank consistently without interruption. That's what's going on when you don't have mindfulness and consciousness in what you are visually consuming. And here it's, you don't just see, but you get to choose what you see and how you see the things that you see. And you start to create deliberate relationship. So if one of these gets in the way, because it's now doing exactly what it's supposed to do, becoming a vehicle through which everything that you do centers through this. I literally can look at this and I just miss everything else that's going on around me. So you gotta put it to the side and you have a physical fast that teaches you that you have self-restraint. And then you move from that to a place that says, I'm gonna now fast from gossiping, from complaining, from backbiting. I'm gonna fast from being racist and hateful. I'm gonna fast from being ungrateful. I'm gonna fast from being intoxicated by technology. What makes it hard to observe? Yeah.
If you are not aware of the destination you are heading to, if you are not looking for a creator or something, a lot of people who observe, they looking for something behind the thing they observe. We live our life very randomly, and we just let the stuff, drive us in this life. So if we don't look for something behind the things we experience, and if we don't try to always renew our destination, intention, and identify the destination we are heading to always, we are going to miss out stuff we observe.
Yeah, and you gotta frame it in this way, right? That there's something that you're missing at the end of the day. There's an aspect to it that what you are getting through these default settings, why we have goals, is not in this weird kind of, watered down rhetoric where people think they sound very profound, but in reality, they give you something without really any substance to it. If you don't have specific things you're working towards, then you're just moving the way everybody else moves. Individually, you haven't come to a place of determination as to why am I taking the steps that I take other than everybody else is doing it. You have capacity because you're all grown people, right? I didn't force you to come sit here. You came here on your own. For what? And the individual nature of setting now an objective, it allows for you to yield more of a process of self-actualization, not just walking with the masses. My relationship with Allah is mine. And if I don't know why I'm walking in the ways that I'm walking, I'm eventually going to get to a place where it's always going to be devoid of what its potential capacity can be. So you sit down again. A couple of points just more directly. You got to find places of stillness. It's okay to rest. I've said this before, but to say it again in the context of this conversation, literally, the name of our God, Allah, is phonetically such a way constructed that the alif comes from the throat, the lam is now elongated from the fullness of your mouth, and the ha is aspirated as a breath comes from you. So in every utterance of Allah, you can breathe. It's not meant to create restriction and constriction and anxiety. It's meant to be a release from these things. You see what I mean? You find spaces, places that are here, they're still, where you can actually listen to the rainfall. You find for yourself opportunity to be in a place where there's room to just breathe. I think Maghrib is at 6:39. So we're just passing them out if you want to wait a few minutes, and we'll call the adhan or let people know. But just for like 3 or 4 more minutes, I think, right? Yeah, if people can pass them around the dates. And we'll break our fast and then go for maybe like another 10 minutes as people trickle in for Maghrib. Then we'll call the adhan and pray. We're going to have iftar after that. If you don't have in your routine deliberate process to just be still, you got to build it in. You can't build inward tranquility through just living in external chaos constantly. Other things that are going to be really important, you got to have wellness as a pursuit, as we're saying, objectives. So do not sleep every night in foolish routines. There's no point to stay up till 2, 3 in the morning if you don't need to. I last night had to be awake till 1 o'clock in the morning because a young man in our community went through a tragic car accident. That's going to always be a priority to sleep. And not because you're hating on yourself, not because you're in this place where I'm being self-deprecating, in this mode of just observation and focus. If you are tired physically, you will not be able to metaphysically benefit from the reflections around creation. Do you get what I'm saying? Where will you go to rest? And to rest is different from finding a place of stillness and solitude. The rest precedes the moment of observation. They're two different things. How do you take care of your free time? You live in a society that tells you that leisure is somehow not something you're supposed to do. Or you have rhetoric religiously that tells you can't. How are there hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is racing his wife and playing a game with her? How are there instances where he's joking with his companions, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam? How does he have the capacity to console a little boy whose pet bird died? Anybody who tells you that this is a religion that says that 24/7 you're just constantly in motion, on and on and on, and adopt this very reductive understanding that the most rigorous and hardest ways to approach religion is somehow the best and most pious, that's not necessarily how it works. Externally, we're taught to take the easier routes. Inwardly, you're going to have struggle. That's what mujahida is. There's going to be things that are hard. But it won't work if there's not deliberate modes. And one of the things that I'll posit, did everybody get a date who was fasting or not fasting? You need one? Yeah. Can we pass them around more? I think we have another box. Can I get one too? One of the reasons you don't do it, I don't do it, is nobody's taught us how to do it. The curriculum that you're exposed to does not tell you to take care of yourself. Religion quite often is just set up in these black and white constructs and doesn't allow, jazakallah khair, for us to sit and be in a place where, let alone reflect, you're taught that you're not even supposed to ask questions all the time. So how would I get to a place? Can we give over here too? Anybody else need a date? Okay. We went into this much longer than I thought we would, and I'm sorry. We're supposed to go through the whole chapter and talk about intention. This is going to be a key opportunity for your own inward development as well as external, because how it works inside will then bleed into what's happening outwardly. You see? So if you can deliberately create for yourself an opportunity to embrace solitude, to find moments of stillness, and build into your routine deliberate modes of replenishment, you're going to get to a place where the practice of your faith is going to be different. Just really quickly, if we can read the next paragraph, and people want to just move in this way, people are trickling in. He says the third is to behave. Can somebody read it?
Yeah, I can read it.
Go ahead.
The third is to behave according to what one believes, outwardly and inwardly, zealously, and to the limited limitations. Like they think about things and they think God is saying, those who strive in us, we shall surely guide them to our ways.
So the vehicle through which you can increase in a virtue is the virtue itself. You want to be more patient, then how you become more patient is by being patient. You want to become more grateful, then the way to become grateful is by being grateful. An example I like to use to illustrate this is with my son Kareem, who's now 7 years old. Many of you have seen him running around. He's a great kid, mashallah. He turned 1 in Singapore. We had gone to Malaysia and Singapore. My wife and I were giving some talks out there. And my daughter, at that point, was able to walk. She's turning 10 this year in December, and Kareem just turned 7 in August. You can do the math. And my wife and my daughter, one day, we were in Kuala Lumpur. They went in a food court to find something very healthy to eat. And my son and I walked over to where there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Malaysia. And as we're going now, my child, who is a New York baby, is crawling next to me as we're going, and he comes to a place now where we are situated, there's a small ramp that goes into the fried chicken place. Kareem's never seen a ramp in his life. He just turned 1. And so he doesn't know what it is, and he doesn't know how to engage it. And so as he comes to it, he looks at me. And I'm a terrible father, so I just said, figure it out. Kareem at 1 year old was a very kind of disproportionate baby in the sense he had big head, a really big rear end. The rest of him did not fit into his body. And so he turned his body around and took one of his feet and just put it onto the top of the ramp and then took it quickly away. He went back and forth like that a few times until he put the second foot on, and then slowly he started to mosey down backwards on this ramp that was like 6 inches off the ground. And then when he got to the bottom of it, he looked at me with a big smile on his face. And he just went up and down the ramp again a bunch of times, because why not? He could do it. The courage that he needed to go down the ramp could only be yielded by going down the ramp. We see this in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ gets a gift of milk. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh is with him, and other companions are also. He is now saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, let's pass it around for others to drink. Abu Hurairah says, I don't want to be the one to be chosen to pass it around, because then I'll be the last one to drink. And he's hungry too. And the Prophet picks him to pass the milk around, and he goes now from companion to companion to companion. Not just 2 or 3, but a large number of people. and then they come to the end, and the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Hurairah are the last ones who haven't drank. He gives it to the Prophet, and the Prophet says, you drink first. Abu Hurairah, to his astonishment, not only takes a full gulp of milk, but takes multiple gulps before the Prophet drinks also. And the Prophet, as a teacher, is teaching his companion, radiallahu an, that the only way you can overcome doubt is by going through the act that is creating the doubt in the first place. The vehicle is the virtue itself. So what Imam al-Haddad is saying here, in the interest of time, is that what you know to be true, then act upon it. The idea is to not have abstract knowledge that you then just utilize never in an act of foolishness. That's what it is. It's devoid of wisdom. So if you know that fasting yields for you a certain impact when you do it in Ramadan, the act of fasting, and then the opportunity comes for you outside to do it, why are you not doing it? And it's not a self-deprecating question. You got to answer the question. If you know it's different, the days that you wake up early, you get a certain amount of sleep at night, and you're not doing what you know yields you benefit, what is that telling you about you? And why do you want to be that version of yourself? If you know that greed is not good, if you know that gossiping is bad, if you are in a place where your belief tells you that Allah is your provider, He is your sustainer, He is the one that has put you in this world, He is the one that's going to take you out, why are you acting contrary to the belief, man? Do you get what I'm saying? And those moments of solitude are important because it's not just a button that I push that says, now I am happy, now I'm sad. But I got to really think about what are the things that are building inwardly that prevent me from going in what I know is what I should be in pursuit of. So it's not just as simple as do it and it gets done. But the ability now, as you get older, to understand that there will be the potential of an ever-increasing gap between what you know and acting upon what you know. As the world gets heavy, your heart becomes bitter. Life throws things in your face. You don't know what it is that you're supposed to do. Marriages don't work. You can't get married to begin with. You want to have kids. You don't get this job. Somebody passed away. You lost a loved one. Somebody hurt you. Somebody messed up your life. I'm sorry for all of those things. But you live in a world that doesn't allow for you to process, to express, to navigate. The next day, you got to somehow just get up and go back to work and pretend like none of it hurt. Doesn't mean that it's not hurting. And it's going to make it easier to have that gap widened between what you know and what you act upon in terms of what you know. You want to narrow the gap, that what you do is rooted concretely in what you know. You understand? And so Imam al-Haddad, he's saying here that one of the best ways to increase in certitude is to act upon what you know to be certain. And it goes back to what was being said before. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it doesn't mean you're still not doing things. And why wouldn't I then be where I'm at in terms of the state of my existence in this moment, right? So I asked you last week, and this is one of those things. If you don't do the process, you won't get from it what can only be gotten by doing it. You got to sit and say, what do I actually believe in this moment? What are the things that I have firm faith and conviction in? And are those things really absolutely things to have faith in? A credential, a job, a house. Because like we said before, none of these things can be absolutely defined as being a ni'mah, a blessing. Because for some people, they're actually the source of great fitna. May Allah grant us ease. But there's certain things that are really always true. God is good. The Quran is good. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is good. If you know these things, then why don't you read that Quran? Why don't you learn that Sunnah? Why don't you worship that God? Not the one that you unconsciously have processed a conceptualization of, but one that you know to be good. Do you get what I mean? And so the third point that he's saying, you want to build it, then you got to act upon it. It's not just enough to know it or to conceptualize it or to write it, but you live by it. You live your belief. You live your convictions. You live your faith. Does it make sense? Okay. Before we take a pause, any thoughts, any questions, any comments that come up from this? We're going to pray in like 3 minutes. Can somebody recap for me the 3 points that he says in building certitude? What are they? You going to say something? What's number one? And what are the 3 things he said that will help you build yaqeen? Are you looking at your phone? Don't get nervous. Are you getting nervous? I can see you're getting nervous. This is so much fun. Are you telling her the answer? I literally can see. What are you doing? You told her the wrong answer? That's not a good friend. Did you hear the question? This was great. Number 1, he says that reflect on who Allah is through Allah's book, right? Know God through God. Don't know God just through somebody who claims to speak on God's behalf. Read the Quran. Read about who Allah says He is. Reflect on His divine names. 2, engage in observation of just the beauty, that if you truly saw the awesomeness of God's creation and you just pondered upon it, like looking at it. I took my kids to Brooklyn the other day. We went to this brunch place called Milk and Honey. Has anybody been to it? It's really good, right? It's their second store. May Allah increase them and grant them tawfiq and make us those who always eat from a halal source. And we went there, and then afterwards we went to this bakery that wasn't really a bakery. It was kind of just a window. We didn't know you could order from the street, and we're stuck on the street, and it's raining like crazy, and there's a bee that's stuck between the window and the outside. And we got there because we didn't know what to do. It's raining, and we're all huddled on this awning, and we're looking at this bee, and we're trying to tell the person inside, get the bee out. It's miserable. And so I magnified my camera on the bee against the window because it's literally right here in front of me, but it can't get to me. And then my kids looked at the intricacy of just the beauty of this creature. This is a part of creation that is specifically mentioned in the Quran. And they said, Baba, I've never seen the bee like this. And I said, well, usually it's because you're freaking out and throwing everything. So you're like, it's going to sting me in my face. But now they could just look at it and observe it. And they said, I didn't know that a bee looked like that. Do you get what I'm saying? And then third, you act upon the certitude. You act upon the conviction. This is why you have Iman and Aql connected in the Quran so much, right? Amanu wa amilu salihat. They go hand in hand. The knowledge is of value when you act upon it. You see what I mean? Does it make sense? Okay. If you can read the rest of this chapter, Imam al-Haddad, he talks about different stages of yaqeen and what that means. He defines step 1 as faith, iman. Step 2 as actual yaqeen, certitude. Step 3, he talks about the yaqeen of the anbiya and the salihin, the awliya, as like a third stage. You can reflect on it. It's a few different paragraphs. We'll touch on it a little bit next time, but go into niyyah, intention, next week, right? Because he gave the destination. In chapter 2, he's going to tell us that before you take a step, you got to know why you're doing what you're doing before you get into it. And then from there, we're going to go into a chapter on what he calls vigilance. The translator is called muraqabah in Arabic, right? So between this Monday and next time we meet, if you just spend some time also looking up these concepts, what is niyyah? What is intention? What is muraqabah, right? Muraqabah essentially is you watching over your heart, so your heart watches over you, right? You ignite it as an organ of cognition. It's present in this kind of visual perception that we're talking about of the world.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at ICNYU.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.